Welcome to Compass Points, the weekly podcast for CompassKnox.com. CompassKnox.com is your best source for news and politics in Knoxville and Knox County. Your hosts today are Scott Barker and Jesse Mayshark, the founders of CompassKnox.com. You can find their daily in-depth coverage and subscribe at CompassKnox.com. The Compass Point podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Almost an Agreement. Almost an Agreement is a layman's attempt to get a handle on the workings in government and politics that we deal with every day. Check them out at almostanagreement.com or subscribe for free on your favorite podcast provider. If you'd like to learn more about the topics discussed on today's podcast, go to CompassKnox.com and subscribe for in-depth coverage and much more. And now, here are your hosts, Scott and Jesse from CompassKnox.com.
Hello and welcome back once again to Compass Points, the weekly podcast where we talk about Knoxville news, politics, government, business, education, pretty much anything that gets our attention here in Knoxville, Tennessee. I'm Jesse Mayshark, co-founder and co-publisher of Compass at CompassKnox.com, joined as always by Scott Barker, co-publisher and co-founder of Compass. How are you doing on this sunny Friday, Scott?
I'm doing great. It's a wonderful day. We're recording this on Friday. It's the end of the week. Weekend's coming up, so all's good.
All's good. Good place to be. Well, we had a somewhat lively week here on the home front.
We did.
We have things to talk about. We will be talking to County Commissioner Dasha Lundy. We have an interview with her coming up because she was involved in one of the most high-profile incidents this week. Discussion at County Commission about, yes, we are still talking about the incident at McAllister's Deli back in November. We will get to that. Knoxville Police Department has some news. Police Chief Paul Noel adding or seeking to add a new position there. Interesting. Little discussion out of the county about impact fees. Impact fees, what are those? Who pays them? How's it going to work? We'll talk about that. And we're going to start off, Scott, with a study that the city of Knoxville recently commissioned having to do with something called missing middle housing. What is missing middle housing?
Missing middle housing is kind of these small-scale, multi-family dwellings.
Give me an example of a missing middle housing.
Duplex, triplex, townhouses. There's some other forms. There's one that's it's kind of a courtyard thing where you have instead of having a cul-de-sac, you have just a courtyard, and then have houses, small houses surrounding that courtyard. These types of houses can't be built in many residential areas in Knoxville.
This is why they're missing.
That's why they're missing. Yes, the most common residential zones in Knoxville don't allow them, and they say the code says they do in some cases, but the lot size is too small.
The setbacks and everything.
Setbacks and everything. They're allowed, but they can't be built there. And this study, the city and the Planning Commission and the Knoxville Area Association of Realtors got together and commissioned this study, and it addresses how Knoxville can get more of this missing middle housing. The zoning and the reason we're kind of in this, these are very common pre-World War II. You can go, there are examples throughout the city. We ran, with our story that we ran last week, took one in that's in 4th and Gill neighborhood. It's a fourplex. And one of the things is that this study came out with is within walking distance, which is about a 10-minute walk of kind of vibrant commercial intersections would be an ideal place for this type of housing. And it talks about how duplexes and triplexes and all can be on the same scale as regular single family houses. And so it's not like going in and putting a 10-story building in the middle of a residential neighborhood. And so within these areas, it's to promote a more walkable city. It's to provide these would tend to have a lower price point than a single family house.
And they could be rental, or they could be
could
condo
be rental,
units.
Could be condo, could be rental. The one thing is that they're wanting to promote this walkability specifically, and it was kind of the study went into how you could do that with zoning and things like that. So it's a way. They don't like to talk about density in this, but it's a way to increase density without looking like you're increasing density.
Right, because if you're putting 2, 3, 4 units on a lot that otherwise might just have a single-family house, obviously there's potential for many more people to live in that same area.
Right. So, and in the city of Knoxville, first of all, it can't grow geographically because it's almost impossible to annex now.
They can only annex if people want to be annexed.
Right, and but in these residential neighborhoods, the only thing, basically your housing options in Knoxville are single-family houses and big apartment complexes, and that's why it's called the missing middle, because these are kind of mid-sized, mid-priced developments, and they, like I said, they talked about the zoning options. There could be you could create new zones for these areas, and then and they identify the areas. There are like 23, 24 areas where basically intersections around the city,
close to major commercial corridors and
stuff. Yeah, they're almost all on commercial corridors or near commercial corridors. And the Broadway Central intersection is one that they identify, for example, and then there are others that could be walkable intersections in hubs if infrastructure changes were made and such. And one of those, as an example, would be the Clinton Highway Merchant Drive intersection where the Knoxville Expo Center is. That's kind of
which they have done some pedestrian improvements at recently.
They have, but anyway, they talked about you could have a completely new type of zone that would allow these types of developments. You could do an overlay similar to a historic overlay in these areas. So the city. I talked to Erin Gill, who's the chief policy officer. She said that that really, they've got enough information from this study to hold a workshop with city council, talk about that, because councils would have to approve any changes to the zoning code, and work through to see what they could adopt, if anything, for Knoxville. Obviously, this doesn't mean they're moving forward with this. It just means that they've got this information and they want to explore it. On the other hand, you sit there and go, okay, well, that's all well and good. Does that mean that developers are going to be coming in here and just throwing up triplexes in my neighborhood? Not necessarily. First of all, these are all built up neighborhoods, so this would be infill housing essentially for the most part.
Right. Not something that somebody can. There's not a lot of space in the city for somebody to come in and say, "I'm going to build 40 fourplexes or whatever."
Right. Yeah. That's not realistic. The areas where you can build a subdivision in the city, and there aren't many of them, but the places you can are not near these hubs. They're they're kind of in nooks and crannies of the city that aren't developed. But the question is there a market for this type of housing? And I talked to Hanson Sale, who is the government affairs director for the Association of Realtors, and basically we don't know. Mm-hmm. They don't know because you can't do it here.
Right.
So they won't know until this type of zoning is in place. Hanson Sale said that they thought there would be a market. Other cities have done similar things and have, and it's a type of housing that is in demand elsewhere, and so there's some studies of young professionals and who a majority say that they would look at housing like this, but we just don't know how that market would be. I think it was the consensus pretty much is this would be, like I said, infill housing that gradually would go into these areas and not others. I mean, there's but a 10-minute walk from an intersection does cover a pretty good area.
Mm-hmm.
When you talk about I looked at one near where
it's kind of a half mile plus radius.
Near where I live is the intersection of Whittle Springs and Washington Pike. Mm-hmm. That's one that was kind of identified. There is a taqueria there and a couple of other businesses.
Mm-hmm. La Esperanza, delicious.
It is. It's a fantastic place. They're not paying us to say this, but it is a fantastic place to go. And there's a Bill Morris Elementary School is there. There's a fire hall there, but there, it could be a hub like this. But this area around the hub where this type of housing would go includes a lot of North Hills. Mm-hmm. It includes a lot of the Arlington, Edgewood area of North Knoxville. It includes a lot of Bell Morris. So that there are a lot, and there are infill lots in those neighborhoods where this could go in. So, but one of the things is, of course, even if they want to do this, there's the political dimension.
Right. Yes. And so we can probably anticipate that, like, let's say council has a workshop. If there is a proposal to make this easier to do more places, the groups that we would expect to raise some concerns about this would be your homeowners associations, neighborhood groups, who are often wary of anything that increases density in single-family areas.
Yeah, they're very concerned about anything that could possibly, perhaps, reduce their property values.
Right.
I don't know if there's any evidence that this would.
And or impact quality of life by bringing more traffic, more people. If they, people tend to have lots of stereotypes about people who live in rental housing in particular and so forth. And by the way, as somebody who lived in rental housing for all of my 20s, 30s, and into my 40s, I think those are very unfair characterizations. Nevertheless, you'll hear people say all sorts of things about people who live in apartments.
Well, and we saw this a few years ago when the city redid their zoning code and the Recode Knoxville effort. It was there were a lot of public meetings, a lot of neighborhood groups would show up there and really talk about how what they wanted and what they didn't want. And what they didn't want was anything that would affect their property values. The same type of discussion went on when talking about short-term rentals, and so you can anticipate that this would be a a pretty lively public discussion. One thing that would be in favor of this is near near what are already commercial hubs, so the increased traffic wouldn't go deep into the neighborhood. It would just be at the edge of the neighborhood. The study does talk about in these areas reducing the requirement for off-street parking to one vehicle per household, which is now two in many of the neighborhoods. So basically, with the idea that people who choose this type of housing near a commercial hub will walk or ride bikes and
may not even have a car.
So, the study does anticipate, a pushback from quarters of the city, but like I said, this is just a study. They haven't even had a workshop yet. It wasn't rolled out with a whole lot of fanfare. So we'll have to, we'll see if the administration does have a workshop with City Council and see how far that goes.
Right. Okay. And if you want to read that study, you can go to the Planning Commission website. It's right there. We had another sort of interesting issue come up this week, also having to do with development. We were just talking about something that could potentially give developers more options in what they do. This is something that would affect developers. This is a discussion of impact fees, and this came up this past week. Thursday morning, County Commission had a legislative breakfast, as they do every year, meeting with the local, the Knox County delegation to the state legislature, as the legislature is gearing up its session this year. And every year, of course, they just kind of, County Commission, the school board does this too, the city does it. They kind of have their list of, here's the things that we would like you to work on for us this session. One of the items on County Commission's list that they presented had to do with impact fees. And what impact fees are is kind of what it sounds like. It is a fee that is charged to a developer. It can be calculated various ways, but the general idea of it is you, the developer, want to come here into our community and build something. And the thing you are going to build is going to bring people, it's going to bring traffic. All of these things are going to have impacts on our local infrastructure, on our transportation infrastructure, our environmental infrastructure. Of course, that's a major issue, runoff and controlling flooding and all of that, and our educational infrastructure, schools. The more people, the more families that move in, the more seats we need in classrooms. And so, kind of traditionally, I think developers have argued that, look, we come in, we build this stuff, we improve the value, we raise the value of the property, therefore you, the county, you, the local government, get money in extra property taxes from our work, which is true. However, there have been a lot of studies, and just kind of like our own experience here in Knox County, show that your incremental property tax increases do not, in fact, cover the cost. Infrastructure costs rise faster than the property tax is going to keep up with, which is why Knox County is so many years behind on its existing needs, and they're on something like, I forget, it's like an 80-year road paving schedule or something like that, because, as we have also talked about before, Knox County has not raised property taxes since the 20th century. 1999 was the last time that the county raised property taxes, and every time there's a reassessment and our overall property values go up, we have talked about this too, the property tax rate has to be adjusted downward, so it's now at $1.55 per $100 assessed. It's lowest rate since World War II, at least, maybe longer. That doesn't look like it's going to change anytime soon. So impact fees are another way, short of a tax increase, that counties can use to basically make developers pay a little bit up front for the demands that they're projects are going to make on local infrastructure. And there are some counties in Tennessee that have these, not that many. Some of them passed them years ago before the state kind of put a moratorium on it. But we do now have, well, it's not a moratorium, but basically any county that wants to do this has to come and ask special permission of the legislature. You get something passed called a private act, which is, and there's a bunch of private acts passed every year, but it's just something that only applies to one county, and it's done at the explicit request of that county. So there are a few counties that have done that in recent years. Knox County is not one of them. But there is a bill proposed this year by 2 Republican legislators from more rural areas. And this is, a lot of the counties that, of course, Knox County has seen a lot of development and demands from that. But in a lot of rural counties, which have much lower tax bases, that are maybe developing as like bedroom communities to nearby larger counties and so forth, these big new developments come in and they don't really have any good way to pay for the infrastructure they need to support them. So those are some of the areas that have looked at this, and the legislators who are proposing this bill come from rural areas themselves. And what this bill would do would just allow any county in the state to pass an impact fee if it wants to, and that impact fee could be up to $3 per square foot of residential development. So let's say you're building a 2,500 square foot house. If a county put in a $3 per square foot impact fee, you would have to pay a $7,500 fee essentially for the house. So, if you're building 100 and some houses, like that could be a fair amount of money, right. And that could be a lot of money that would go into the county's, funds that they could use for infrastructure work. So nobody in Knox County is proposing doing an impact fee right now, but what County Commission is asking our local legislators to do is to support this bill. I think we can anticipate that bill will probably be opposed by home builders, developers. They do not like these kinds of things. You can anticipate that they will argue that this is going to raise our costs at a time that our costs are already going up because of materials and inflation, at a time when people are already worrying about housing affordability, and you're going to stick us with more costs. That would be the argument against it. The argument from the counties would be like, John Schoonmaker, the commissioner who talked about this at the legislative breakfast, and he has made this point sort of repeatedly at County Commission, but he was saying, like, we're going to have to pay for it somehow. Like, it's not going to happen by magic that we're going to have the adequate resources to build road. He said costs of asphalt are up 30+% this year, for example. And County Commissioner Kim Frazier, who, as we've talked about, she was just elected this past year. She comes out of a background of, sort of homeowner activism, planning, advocacy. She's somebody who has made very strong arguments that Knox County needs to do a better job of having the infrastructure ready to accommodate growth. And so she said that if the county were given the possibility to have impact fees, what she would propose is to do a study. Look at impact fees, how do they work, who uses them, what are their pros and cons, what are their actual negative impacts, not just the ones that a developer might say, but like what can we see from experience other places, before she would, be open to proposing any. But I think it shows the fact that this is not just a couple of commissioners saying this, but this was on the legislative priorities for the entirety of commission, shows that, some commissioners are kind of doing the math. They realize, obviously, that County Mayor Glenn Jacobs is not likely to propose a tax increase in the next 4 years. And so that if there aren't some other ways for the county to get some revenue in to deal with this, they're just going to keep falling farther behind.
Yeah, and one of the arguments that the development community will make is, they frequently do road improvements where their development is going in. They'll pay for a turn lane to be put in, or even a traffic signal in some cases. They'll pay for widening a road. Where their development is.
Yeah.
But not 2 miles down, 2 miles up the road or down the road where, you still got a 2-lane road and you've got, all of a sudden you have an extra, 500 vehicle trips per day generated by this subdivision. So
right,
this
and
would
they
be a
will.
way-
They're required in some very limited places even to build a section of sidewalk. But that again is just sort of along the frontage of their property.
Right.
And so it kind of having that kind of piecemeal little bits of infrastructure improvements obviously help in those specific areas. But like you're saying, it doesn't give the county the resources to do the connections between those areas and the kind of bigger picture work.
Yeah, and one thing that is true here, you mentioned this earlier about the rural counties, because a lot of big industry moves into rural counties. In West Tennessee, where Blue Oval City is going in, where Ford is building their mega plant, it's in a poor county.
Yeah.
In fact, there's a town near there that the state comptroller had to take over their finances because their finances were so bad, and they have no tax base to draw. And this is near Blue Oval City. This isn't even the same county, but it's close enough to where they anticipate a huge population increase because of its proximity to Blue Oval City. And it's the town's called Mason, and it would be something like this there would make a lot of sense.
Right.
And in fact, they may do the max there. And you don't have to do the maximum, although most governments would.
Right. It's kind of like if you're going to take the political hit for doing it in the first place, there'll probably be some incentive to just go for what you can get. But who knows? It's very much up in the air whether this law will even pass. And it'll be interesting if this law doesn't pass. Does County Commission come back the next year and say, okay, we will try to do a private act for Knox County? I don't know. That would be an option for them. But this is something that's been talked about now and then over the years in Knox County, and nobody has ever acted on it. So it's interesting. We do have a bit of a different makeup on County Commission now after this last round of elections. And we'll see what conversation arises. Seth, did you have a question about?
I did. You said while you guys were talking about it, that it's residential only. So a commercial developer or an industrial developer like the Oval City, they wouldn't have by square footage of their warehouse or their
I don't
production
know
facility?
exactly. All of the discussion in this bill is about residential development, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't apply to commercial. I'm not actually sure.
Okay, because I was curious. That was the one I was very curious about. Because then I'm also curious about how, going to the first segment of the show today, talking about the missing middle housing, how much a thing like this could affect developers wanting to do stuff like that, whether that's a pro or con for them long term.
Yeah, well, I think that, again, if you just kind of think about the back of the envelope math, this is the kind of thing where missing middle housing, it would make missing middle housing, I would think, more appealing because you just get more units for the square feet, because the impact fee is based on square feet. And so, if you do a 5,000 square foot fourplex that's got 4 units in it versus a 3,000 square foot home that's just single occupant,
right?
That you're more able to cover the per square foot
just spread it
cost
out a little bit
of the development.
Yeah,
right. Exactly.
I understand. Anyway, like I said, I was just curious about whether or not it affects outside of. I'd be curious to see how that develops and keep an eye on it myself as well.
Yeah, I think one of the things you mentioned about industrial property and what. The governments tend to give industry
right.
things.
Yeah, they're probably not paying taxes in the first place. I didn't think about that part when I said it out loud.
So they're the recipients of incentives.
Yeah, but then you could use it as a sales pitch to be like, this is how much less taxes we're going to charge you or give you in this setup. Instead of charging you $3 a square foot, we're not going to charge you that. So that's a bonus.
Yeah.
I
do think that impact fees in general tend to get talked about for residential construction because that's where you tend to have sort of your largest infrastructure impacts, although obviously a big industrial development can have. Right.
Well, because the simple one right now is you got that Amazon plant out at Easttown.
Yeah.
How much has the state and county or city put into trying to get all those interchanges on and off 640 to help that Amazon facility function better?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And that's a good point. But I think that Jesse's right. I mean, one of the big things about this or kind of philosophically about it is these impact fees will help with the schools as well, and that's where the Amazon itself is not going to bring children into the Knox County school system, but the people who work at Amazon who buy houses or rent houses or whatever will definitely bring children to Knox County schools. So,
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Sure.
All right, turning toward law enforcement. We have the next couple of items we're going to talk about are about law enforcement, and we're going to talk about both of our local police agencies. Let's start out with the Knoxville Police Department. What is Chief Paul Noel up to this week?
Well, Chief Noel's been really busy in his 7 months that he's been here. In fact, he held a press conference last week just to talk about the changes that he's instituted because he wants to change the culture of KPD, make it more accountable, build up trust within the department and with the community. And one of the things that he wants to do is he wants to create a new executive level position in the department. He has to get approval from City Council to do that. And this would be a Deputy Director of Professional Standards is the title. It's not a law enforcement position. You don't need to be a sworn officer to have it, but you do have to have a law degree. And he thinks that is very important. But this position would is a huge portfolio. Just a lot of things for this person to do. One is to develop policies and procedures that would enhance and improve the culture at KPD. The position would oversee internal affairs investigations, would be the liaison with the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation and the District Attorney General's office on officer-involved shootings. Would be the liaison with the Police Advisory and Review Committee. But the whole thing. I mean the list of qualification or responsibilities is long, paragraph after paragraph. So in the job description. So, but anyway, Noel wants this position to be. And one of the reasons he talks about being an attorney rather than a law enforcement officer is that it's somebody who is not enmeshed in the police culture. He would like to see someone with criminal justice experience, either a prosecutor or criminal defense attorney or something like that. But not someone who is, as I said, enmeshed in that police culture. Someone who can bring an outsider's perspective, if you will, or
and maybe willing to challenge that culture,
and be willing to challenge the culture. And one of the things is to make sure they do everything legally. Part of the portfolio is to come up with ways to promote equity in hiring and in promotions and things like that, in both gender and race. Which of course, KPD's had issues with both sexism and racism, and it's fewer than 5% of the police force is African American.
Yeah, in a city where the population is what, 16-17%.
16% is what the population is, and there are very few African Americans in command positions. In fact, none above the rank of sergeant, I believe, right now. So it's this officer would be or not officer. I said that, but this position would also be responsible for some of the recruiting efforts and how to go about recruiting new officers, and they are emphasizing hiring African American and Hispanic officers because they know they have an equity issue just from sheer numbers, but So now this position would be the equivalent of a deputy chief. Now, deputy chiefs are one step below the chief himself, and the pay scale is in the low six figures, probably up to $160,000 or so, somewhere in there. Noel said that would be, he would negotiate a salary with whoever comes in, but this person would have a tremendous amount of authority within the department, and Noel said that it doesn't mean that the rest of us aren't going to be doing anything like this, but this person, this is their every their duties 100%. This thing, instead of having an officer who also commands officers in the field or whatever, instead of having someone with multiple responsibilities already take on this, it's this person's baby.
And City Council will be voting on this?
They 2 weeks ago they voted on first reading to approve it. There was very little discussion, which was kind of surprising. Although in the context, if our listeners from last week know, it was a long meeting with plenty of contentious issues.
They were talking about dog tethering.
Dog tethering, which took about half the night to iron that one out. So they really didn't. There wasn't a whole lot of discussion about it. They're going to vote for it on second reading Tuesday. Now there will be some discussion. I'm confident that there will be discussion on this and maybe some dissent. Amelia Parker, who is a council member who's been a frequent critic of KPD and wants greater reform, said told me she has questions about the position, about how it will function, not necessarily what it will do, but how, for instance, how this person would interact with the Police Advisory and Review Committee. And she also thought that the city kind of missed the boat and they could have strengthened Park's powers without, wouldn't make this, that part of this job necessary. But she's going to have questions. Other council members might have questions as well, because quite frankly, between the tethering issue and the tax incentive that they gave to the developer of the Cumberland Avenue mixed-use development down there, kind of sucked all the air out of the room. The meeting, lasted 5 hours or so anyway. Right. So I think they were worn out then. But the agenda for this week is less robust, and so they will talk about it and hold the vote on second reading then.
All right. Well, speaking of police accountability, at County Commission this past week, Commissioner Dasha Lundy, who represents the 1st District, which is East Knoxville, all of downtown, and stretches across through Mechanicsville and Lonsdale, and is the only majority-minority district in the county. She brought a discussion item having to do with the incident at McAllister's Deli back on November 21st, which we have talked about here before. Quick recap. There were 3 deputies from the sheriff's office who went into McAllister's on a Monday evening to get food. They said they were refused service, and and they left without getting food. That evening, the sheriff's communications director, Kimberly Glenn, put a report of this out on her personal Facebook page, that they'd been refused service at this deli, created a kind of social media storm, got everybody mad at McAllister's. And then the next day, McAllister's came out, and without saying anything too specific about what had happened, they said, "We support police, 100%. And the day after that, the 15-year-old girl who was kind of at the center of all this, who was at the cash register when these officers came in, lost her job. Now, McAllister's did not say that she lost her job because of anything she said or did to the officers. They said she lost her job because they discovered, after having hired her in the first place, that she was 15 and that McAllister's is not supposed to hire 15-year-olds. They said that's why she got fired. Anyway, she got fired. And of course, it came out that she is the sister of Anthony Thompson Jr. Her name is Anaya Thompson. Anthony Thompson Jr. is the student who was killed in a confrontation with Knoxville Police Department officers in a bathroom at Austin East High School in 2021, creating, of course, a whole lot of controversy and protest. The officers involved were not charged by the district attorney, and so that was a big tumultuous issue. And obviously, of course, for Anaya Thompson, what it meant was that her older brother had been killed. And so she came out on social media, and then at December's county commission meeting, she came and spoke to commission herself and basically said she'd been completely misrepresented by the sheriff's office. She said she never refused anybody's service. She had stepped away from her cash register and asked somebody else to handle it. And there are multiple consistent reports from other coworkers that regardless of anything Anaya Thompson may have said or done, and again, we haven't had any actual explicit accounts that she said anything. The officer, the report that the sheriff's office first put out just said they'd been denied service, but didn't give any details of that. She says she didn't deny anyone service, and in any case, there was somebody else immediately there ready to serve them, and the officers themselves became bothered or offended that she herself was not the one who served them, and they left without being served, but that they could have been served. There are multiple accounts of this, consistent accounts. There was somebody right there at the cash register to take their order. They're the ones who chose to leave. There are multiple accounts of that. The sheriff's office has not responded. Since the day after this happened, the sheriff's office has kind of taken a radio silence approach to it, seemingly hoping it would go away, is kind of the sense that you get. They just kind of want it to go away. But it hasn't gone away. And in fact, it's actually amped up, and more people in the community have raised questions about it, basically saying that the sheriff's office misrepresented the situation, that they never should have put it on social media in the first place, that this is what led to her being fired one way or another, whatever the exact reason was. Clearly, she's the center of this. She gets fired 2 days later. It's hard not to see that there's a connection there. Dasha Lundy, who represents the district where Anaya Thompson lives and is also the only black member of county commission, she invited people from the community to come to last month's meeting to talk about this, and Anaya came and talked about it. And Dasha Lundy went and actually stood next to her while she was speaking, just to kind of give her some support. This month, she asked the sheriff's office to come and respond to this. She asked Sheriff Tom Spangler to be there and to bring with him the deputies who were there to talk about it, and also to talk about the sheriff's office social media policy, how it uses social media, and whether the way it used social media in this case was, consistent with its policy. So she asked for all of that. What she received, she didn't hear anything for a few days. This past Tuesday morning, the day of the commission work session, she got a short email from Sheriff Spangler basically saying, I'm unavailable to be there. I'm not going to have anybody from my department there. Nobody is coming. And also, if you, Commissioner, want to know about our social media policy, you can file a public records request. And here's a link to our form where you can file a public records request, which I'm going to go ahead and say is an unusual kind of communication for a sheriff to a county commissioner. Now, we've certainly had times in the past where there were members of county commission who were critics of the sheriff at the time. We think back to the 1990s, the wars and the lawsuits between Sheriff Tim Hutchison and Commissioner Wanda Moody in particular. There were a few others, but she was kind of the leader. So it's not unprecedented for there to be, some friction between members of county commission and the sheriff's office. The sheriff is not under the direct supervision of county commission, although they do fund his budget. So it's not that they don't have any leverage points over the sheriff. But still, the curtness of this email and the direction to file a public records request for what is A, clearly a public document, and B, just a very standard document. They have a policy. It's part of their standing orders. It's something that one might think a sheriff or their office would just kind of provide to anybody who asks, much less a county commissioner, without forcing them to go through the rigmarole of filling out a public records request form and everything.
A lot of places it's on their website.
Yeah, a lot of departments do in fact have these things on their website. You can just go and look at them.
The Knoxville Police Department.
Exactly. So Dasha Lundy was not happy about this, and she had said previously to this that among the things this whole incident makes her think is that the sheriff's office maybe needs to have some. You mentioned the Police Advisory Review Committee that exists in the city, which of course is independent of the police department and serves as a sort of outside. They also don't have a ton of power, as Amelia Parker has pointed out, but they do have some power, and they do their own investigations. It's another place where people who have issues with the police can go, and you can file a complaint directly with them without going to the police department. So in the county, in the sheriff's office, there's nothing like that. And the sheriff, of course, being independently elected, does not answer to anybody else. What sheriffs will tell you is, I answer to the voters. If the voters don't like me, they can vote me out. Of course, in Spangler's case, he was just reelected to a second 4-year term. He's term limited. He can't be voted out. He literally, a second-term sheriff, really does not have anybody they answer to. They just don't. There's no legal authority when it comes to matters of policing, police conduct, those kinds of things. Outside of, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation will investigate, or, the U.S. Attorney's Office can investigate if there's somebody who's breaking the law, and they do. We've had members of the Sheriff's Office indicted here in recent years. But for this kind of thing where it's not, it'd be hard to say that anybody in this instance broke a law. I don't think so. But there's a concern about conduct, basically, and engagement with, the civilian population. There's no place to go. You can complain to the sheriff's office, and that's it. You can complain to your county commissioner. The county commissioner can call the sheriff and ask about it, but they have no authority over them. And so Lundy has said that, she thinks that would be maybe one thing that the county needs. But Lundy was fairly upset, I would say, at this past Tuesday's meeting. And if you didn't watch it, it is worth, I think, going and watching the video, because she said some pretty strong things about the sheriff's office. She said she thought it was cowardly of Spangler not to show up. She also said she wasn't surprised that they didn't. But she concluded by saying that, kind of having exhausted her options here as a commissioner, to try to have a friendly conversation about this. Spangler did also say that he would meet with her privately. But what she said in the meeting was, she doesn't just want to go and have a meeting with it herself. She thinks this is a public issue that the people who she represents demand and deserve answers. And that since this is something that the sheriff's office essentially created as a public, nobody would know anything about this had the sheriff's office not chosen to put it out on social media.
Right.
It never would have risen to anybody's attention at all. And so, that them having made it public, she thinks that they should be willing then to come and talk in public about it. They're the ones who chose to make it a public incident. And so she said she's going to attempt to bring subpoenas, which is a power that commission has. It's not a power I've ever seen them use. There may be instances in the past, but they do have legal subpoena power, which it takes a 2/3 vote of commission to do this. But if they vote it, they can serve somebody with a subpoena that then legally requires them to come and, answer questions to county commission. And she said she didn't want to do this. She didn't want to have to do this. She didn't want to put the rest of commission in the position of voting on it, which she knows is not going to be a super comfortable vote. Of course, commission, first of all, it's a Republican majority on commission, 9 out of 11. Lundy is one of the 2 Democrats.
And Spangler is a Republican.
And Spangler's a Republican. And commission overall tends to be quite supportive of the sheriff's office, quite supportive of law enforcement. And so, the idea that it would take 8 out of the 11 votes to get to that 2/3, and the idea that she could get 8 votes for this, I think she recognizes would be a hurdle. And she also recognizes that it's going to be not a super comfortable vote probably for a lot of people on commission. But she said she's going to do it because she thinks it's important, and this is kind of the only other step that's left to her as a county commission to do. So it's an interesting situation.
It is an interesting situation. You've got an independently elected sheriff who doesn't answer to anybody, and at least one commissioner who wants that sheriff to answer to commission. Now, you can think, well, he doesn't answer to anybody, but it would help if they would, speak in public and clear the air. But, one of the things about being independent is if you don't want to, you don't have to. Mm-hmm. And that is, with that overview, we've got our interview this week with Commissioner Lundy.
Yep, and we sat down with her to kind of talk through all of this and her thoughts and experiences of it. And so let's go ahead and go to that tape. Our guest this week is Dr. Dasha Lundy, who is the commissioner for the 1st District on County Commission. She is a physical therapist, also has a background in neighborhood organizing and representation in the Burlington community before she was on commission. She was elected to commission in 2020. So Dasha, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Oh, I appreciate you all for inviting me.
Well, let's jump in. We've had kind of a active week here, I guess, probably especially for you. And we're talking about this situation that happened back in November at the McAllister's Deli. And I guess, could you first of all, just to set us up a little bit, just talk about, when did you first hear about this? And what have been your efforts leading up to this past week's meeting, just to try to get more information about it?
Yeah, so I heard about the McAllister situation, I guess, on November 21st with the first Facebook post from the sheriff's communication director. And I remember reading it like, this sounds weird. I didn't know anything involved in it. And then until it came out that was Anaya Thompson. And one of the community members reached out. He like, have you heard? And I like, catch me up, because I'm kind of confused at what's going on. And then once I heard that she lost her job, I said, oh, this is not good. So I'm thinking maybe this is a misunderstanding, because I always tell people I do have a little green naiveness to my heart and just want to see the good things, try to see there's a way to make everything better, and it shouldn't be all drama and all that stuff. So I text the sheriff. It was actually on November 30th when I texted sheriff. I like, oh, can we fix this? Like, this doesn't look good. Can we get her a job back? Just trying to figure out, can we talk about this? So we don't have to, it shouldn't be escalated even further. It's a 15-year-old child. And basically he just told me to let it lie. And I'm like, okay, that's fine with me. I'm gonna write a statement. I did tell him before I release a statement. And I said, I have to support my community like you support your officers. And I told him I do respect that about him. I love people who just advocate for the people they feel like they are called to lead. And from then on, it's just been quite a bit of experience of feeling like anything that happens to people of color or Black people, and especially in the community, just feels like we're just like not taken seriously. So I hate that we're in this situation. And I hate that I have to go as far as I have to go when I really want to just try to keep it, in-house. Let's fix this. Everybody fine, move on with your lives kind of thing. And that, unfortunately, we are at this space where we are talking about racial justice conversations in the forefront and really nationally right now. Knox County is definitely trending nationally.
Yeah, this situation in particular has definitely gotten some traction on Twitter. I've seen, well, and obviously Anaya Thompson herself came and spoke to commission in December. And You went up and kind of stood beside her while she was talking, which is not something you see commissioners do a lot. And did you feel like you kind of wanted, because she was a 15-year-old girl up there by herself, that you kind of wanted to have somebody there with her?
Yeah, well, let me be clear. I didn't even really know her name. I just knew she was Auntie Thompson's sister. I didn't know how she looked. I didn't invite her to the meeting because I will be scared. I always put myself in other people's shoes. I'm 15 and I'm trying to process what's going on. I was not even going to ask her to come. I was just going to be her voice because she wrote a statement on Facebook, and that was my plan. And then she came up to, because that was a contentious meeting anyway with everything going on. And she came up to me, and her aunts came up, and she's like, I said, "Oh my gosh, you're Anaya." She like, "Yeah." And she was just so quiet and just really sweet. And she said, "I'm going to speak." And there's no way that I could let her speak in front of all those people without her, with her feeling alone. And I had to stand behind her and let her shine. And the craziest part, I was shaking. I feel like I had so much, I don't know if it's fear, anxiety. And she just stood there so poised, and she stood there with so much conviction and authority. I like, man, when I talked to her mother afterwards, I said, "You are raising a real leader." And her statement was just so profound, straight to the point. And I hate that she had to come to commission to say that, but yeah, I think people felt that.
Well, and so then after that, this month, you wrote a letter to Sheriff Spangler, basically asking him to come and bring the deputies who were involved, and also to talk about their social media policy, because basically all of this kind of happened on social media, the sheriff's social media, and like you said, his communications director, Kimberly Glenn's. And so then you didn't hear any response to that until the day of the meeting, right?
Correct.
You read that email at the commission meeting that the sheriff sent you. When you received that email, I guess, what was your impression of just the tone of that email?
You know what? I didn't really respond to a tone. I was not surprised. Let's put it that way. I knew they wasn't coming. I'm just trying to maintain just the protocol and the pathways. Like, I'm not trying to take it up to a next level. As I was prepping to what I'm going to say, how I'm going to respond, my response was going to be the same if they came or did not come to the meeting. But yeah, I just wasn't surprised. And because I still feel like when it happens to us, when I mean us, people of color and Black people, no one really cares. And it's saddening that people believe that Anaya should forget this has happened, and her life has tremendously altered by the officers and the people who work for the sheriff's office still have the job, and they're getting paid, and they get to be at home in their peace. And she's still struggling with a brother who was shot, and she's still struggling to losing her first job. And I don't think that's fair.
And if the representatives from the sheriff's office had been there Tuesday, like what were the kinds of questions that what were the things you wanted to hear from them about this incident?
I really want to know what happened, exactly what happened, and why was it important to put it on social media? Was it worth it? Did you even consider her side of the story, or you just seen someone walk off and not even really understand there may be a reason, it might not be a reason, but why did we have to blow it up like this? That was my thought process.
And so now you're talking about seeking subpoenas, and is that still basically the goal? I mean, you're looking for answers to those questions, essentially.
I'm still looking answers for questions, but I want you to take me seriously too. I can't play. I want to play nice, and unfortunately, I had to use subpoena powers. Why do we have to go through this when I just want to play nice? I just want to say your side. Okay, what can we do to make this better? How can we get Anaya's job back? How can we clear her name? I mean, it's common sense to me, but I realize that, we live in a very difficult world right now. But I was just hoping that we can just everybody say what's on their mind, and then we just let it go and move forward. But we can't do that because no one wants to show up.
Well, and you talked about feeling marginalized. I mean, first of all, obviously you're the only Black member of commission.
Mm-hmm.
You represent the only minority majority district in the county.
Mm-hmm.
And countywide, I forget, I think the Black population countywide is 9%.
Yeah, back between 8 and 9%. Yeah, I think so. Mm-hmm.
And so do you feel like, because this is something I've heard some people on school boards say as well, but do you feel like sometimes it can be hard just to get other members of commission or other parts of county government to kind of, like you say, take seriously the concerns of what is countywide, kind of such a small group?
Oh yeah, it always feels like it's an uphill battle for us because it is. I'm just one voice, and then I have to go. I got 10 other votes with me, and people don't understand. And it's like we're being in this fight for 50 years, where all our life. I mean, just still going up this fight. And I said in my statements on Tuesday, we're tired. And if you can't see the injustice, I'm not sure where we are when, we have a 42% poverty rate. People will argue with me about the percentage number, but hell, just come to East Knoxville, come to my community, come to my district. You can see there's a big difference, not just East Lonsdale, Mechanicsville area, but you can see there's a huge difference of how that looks compared to the county. Mm-hmm. And what can we do to make it better? And it really comes to let's talk to get at the table and have these difficult conversations. But as we've seen, from that commission meeting, my feelings were unheard. Mm-hmm. And I was attacked from using the word racism. And that's unfortunate.
Even though you tried to kind of say that you weren't even the one calling it racist, that this is something people, including a lot of white people, you said, calling you saying this is racist.
Yeah, most of my emails have come from middle-aged white women, and they tell me they call themselves middle-aged. They like, I am a middle-aged white woman, and this is racism. And then it's not funny, but it's kind of funny because you have to find humor in all the pain that you endure. Someone emailed me yesterday. He said, and by the way, I'm a middle-aged white male, and I stand with you. Right. So so that's where we are, and I used to call racism the R word. I hate using the R word because every time I use it, it triggers people. Not trying to divide. We have to understand that these are real feelings for a whole community, and don't discount that. That's not fair. Because I don't discount your feelings. I might not agree with them, but I value your voice.
Well, and so I guess just last question on this. I mean, obviously there's going to be more discussion. You'll be bringing something next month, but what kind of feedback have you gotten since Tuesday's meeting? What kinds of responses have you heard from people?
Well, as far as from my community, they are very proud. They said when I walked out the meeting, they was even prouder. They see someone standing up, not afraid to go against a system that we constantly endure daily that other people don't understand. That system that breaks us. And I feel overall support, but I don't really watch the news and really get into comments. That's mental health. You can't always read the comments, right, Jesse? But so that's where we are. But it's just people have been reaching out and just say thank you, and thank you for standing for that little girl. And and I know this is bigger than me. This is bigger than Anaya. It's time to transform our county for the best, not to create division, but we have to do better at valuing people, period, regardless of your race.
Yeah, Dash, I'm going to shift gears tremendously here. Although it does, this is a matter that is supremely important, I think, to many in the African American community, and that's Knoxville College. You've been you and President Adams are trying to essentially resurrect. I mean, Knoxville College has never really been completely dead, but you're pretty much trying to resurrect it and revitalize it into making it a viable educational institution. What's the status right now of your efforts?
Yes, so right now we are working with UT students who are working on their PhD in higher ed leadership. They're working on our accreditation. So that's been the main project right now. And that's a lot of paperwork, a lot of digging and stuff, making sure that we're operating in integrity. That's looking at audits, that's looking at past audits, that's looking at infrastructure, all that stuff. So that's where we are. We hope to apply for accreditation this year. We lost our accreditation in December of 1996. So that's what, 25 years? Someone's gonna have to help me with the math. Probably say, I don't know how to do math, but you get the point. It's been a long time, and we know that you can't get in any door without having accreditation, because people's like, well, you can apply for grants. It's really hard because people always ask for accreditation. So that's where we are. We also looking at getting a new building just to function out of, so we can bring community and people can host events, just really just trying to bring the community back to KC and really get back to accreditation and growing at campus. And I mean, just to add on to this, because I constantly try to figure out, like, okay, why me? Why am I in this situation? Why am I a commissioner and not a college? Because that's two big things. And I can't help but to say, when I was at that meeting, the December meeting, standing behind Anaya and getting support, all I kept thinking, this is why we need a Knoxville College. Because I kept seeing the future Knoxville College students. I like the students, if it was thriving, Knoxville College students would have been there behind me, standing with me with Anaya, because that's what we did. We led a lot of civil rights movements. Knoxville College students led the civil rights movement in Knoxville. And we have to get back to that. And I know a lot of people don't understand the value of it, but we are supposed to be that light, and we supposed to lead with social justice. So that's why I really worked so hard, and President Adams worked so hard of trying to not give up hope, because we know that Knoxville needs a Knoxville College, especially where we are now.
Yeah, one of the things, one of the news things that happened last week was the city hired Kevin DuBose to be the housing director there, and Kevin's a Knoxville College graduate.
Yeah.
I don't know what year he graduated, but he's been in the workforce for 30 years or so. So it's been a while. But in so many African American professionals in the Knoxville area are Knoxville College graduates, and but it's a generation that's getting older and older.
Yeah.
But the impact of the college on the community as a whole, and not just the African American community, but it's part of the fabric of the greater community as well. And one of the things that I've gotten from talking to you and Dr. Adams is that connection with community, and part of that is using part of the campus for community housing, and bring the community on campus and the campus into the community. And so I know there's there are plans for an apartment complex on the backside of campus. What are those, and what is the kind of the future projection of that kind of effort?
Yeah, so I still have to figure out the funding piece of that. Strategic partners with that, but that's something that we are moving forward on. It's a lot of parts. It's just a lot of parts to try to get in there, and unfortunately, we're still dealing with a past of people who say don't touch them, don't trust Knoxville College. So we're still in that building relationship stage, because we're going to need support from a partner that will help us do that housing. So that's where we are, but still in the plan, and really trying to find partners who will want to be on the campus and can take a building, maybe redo it, but they can use that as their place for their business. But really just trying to figure out ways that we can still serve the community and people who align with the vision of Knoxville College, of really just educating and empowering and elevating the community to be on that campus. So that's where we are.
All right. Well, I think we can wrap up there. Lots of stuff that we'll be following up on, I'm sure, as all of these different threads continue to develop. So Dr. Dasha Lundy, thank you so much for joining us. And we'll be talking to you.
Oh, thank you. I'll stay in touch with you all too.
All right. Thanks so much.
And thanks again to Dasha for talking with us. I think we can expect some more conversation about this, both from the public and probably from members of commission over the next month or so. Speaking of which, looking ahead to this coming week, County Commission is meeting. Their meeting last week was their work session. They're having their regular monthly meeting this Monday at 5 o'clock in the main assembly room of the City County building. On the agenda, there are a couple of items that we've talked about before. The Concord Yacht Club contract is coming back. Commission is trying to work out the terms of allowing the sailboat enthusiasts of the Concord Yacht Club to continue to lease county land out there near the Cove at Concord Park. Also, they are hiring a consultant for the request for proposals that they're going to be putting out for a new ambulance contract. We've talked about that a bit. So those are both on the agenda. There is not specifically further discussion of the McAllister's incident on the agenda, but I will be surprised if there aren't some people who show up at public forum to talk about it. And there's nothing to say that there couldn't be further discussion of it at commission. There's just no action item on it for that. And then that is followed on Tuesday by City Council.
Yeah, Tuesday, City Council meets 6 o'clock, main assembly room of the City County building. As mentioned before, kind of the big thing on the agenda is the new position, executive level position at the Knoxville Police Department, second reading of that. We don't need to run through all that again, but that'll be on the agenda. The dog tethering ordinance, the second reading of it will be on the agenda since they pretty much have solved, which avenue they're going down. It's fine. There may be amendments to it, though. The new ordinance will, as passed last week, would require, if you tether your dog in the yard, you have to be outside with it within its vision of you. That could be tweaked to either, and we don't know what the language would be of the tweaking. Councilmember Amelia Parker had talked about possibly doing that, but would allow the person to be on the premises, maybe inside the house, or the way it's written now. If you've got the dog on the east side of the house and you're weeding the garden on the west side of the house, it's illegal. You have to be within eyesight of the animal. So that could be tweaked, but essentially, there shouldn't be. There won't be the huge back and forth that we had 2 weeks ago. A couple other things on the agenda. They really caught up with all the controversial stuff last week or 2 weeks ago. But they will be talking about buying property for the Northwest Greenway and then Pleasant Ridge Road improvements project. So they're going to be either buying them or through eminent domain. They're going to get the property to do that, and that's going to be up for approval on Tuesday. And they're going after another big grant, $1 million grant from Bloomberg about to improve for bicycle infrastructure. So, but that's that's just telling the mayor's office that they can go apply for it. We'll see if you don't always get those grants.
Right.
So.
I also wanted to mention on County Commission during the zoning portion of the meeting on Monday, they're going to be voting on that big Belltown development that we've talked about. We talked about when it came through Planning Commission, but this is this enormous new residential and also some commercial and other things there up in North Knox County. So that is on the County Commission agenda as well. And then the school board is having a quarterly work session Thursday at 5 p.m. in the Summer Place boardroom. They have not published an agenda for it yet. I believe they're going to be getting an update on their federal ESSER funding, which is that big pot of like $114 million in pandemic relief funds that the school system got. And so they have to make sort of periodic reports on what they're doing with that money to support students and teachers. And those are the things we know about coming up this coming week. As always, we don't know about the things that haven't happened yet. So
the unknown unknowns.
That's right. We will be back next week to tell you whatever those were. Thanks, as always, to Lord Seth Barber for his excellent production work here at Barbarian Productions. Our theme music is by Will Wright.
Happy birthday!
Happy birthday, Will Wright. That's right. We are taping today on the birthday of the one and only Will Wright. We hope he's having a great one, and we will see you all next week.
Welcome to Compass Points, the weekly podcast for CompassKnox.com. CompassKnox.com is your best source for news and politics in Knoxville and Knox County. Your hosts today are Scott Barker and Jesse Mayshark, the founders of CompassKnox.com. You can find their daily in-depth coverage and subscribe at CompassKnox.com. The Compass Point podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Almost an Agreement. Almost an Agreement is a layman's attempt to get a handle on the workings in government and politics that we deal with every day. Check them out at almostanagreement.com or subscribe for free on your favorite podcast provider. If you'd like to learn more about the topics discussed on today's podcast, go to CompassKnox.com and subscribe for in-depth coverage and much more. And many thanks to William Wright for composing our theme song. Compass Points is a partnership of Barking Shark Media and Barbarian Productions, and recorded by Lord Seth A. Barber at Barbarian Studios, Knoxville, Tennessee.